How's it going, my wholesome bunch of bakers? Hope you're having a great day so far. Welcome back to another video. Today we're making Brötchen, which are little crusty mini bread rolls. So let's get in the kitchen and get started. These cute little breads are perfect for serving alongside soups or stews. They could also be part of a breakfast offer with butter and other spreads. You could also make little sandwiches with them, but there are better breads for that application. Making little breads like these is quite fun. You can test your shaping skills and pretend you're a giant at the same time. These bad boys are super crusty, flavorful, and they have a great texture. You can adjust this recipe by swapping some of the ingredients or perhaps adding some seeds to it. You can also use this dough to make a larger loaf. There's always space for customization in bread making. But for now, let's get on with it. Let me show you how they're made. Starting with the ingredients, we'll need some white bread flour, whole wheat bread flour, whole grain rye flour, also known as dark rye flour. We'll need some yeast, some salt and water. When it comes to the equipment, we need a baking tray lined with some non-stick paper, we need a bowl, scales, a dough scraper, a temperature probe, and something to score the rolls with. A razor blade will definitely be the best tool for the job, but you can also use a sharp knife or even scissors. There are a few things that play a part in the crustiness of these breads. One is the cold fermentation, second is a high temperature bake, and third is steam, which we will create by spraying the dough with water. Okay, let's begin. And it all starts with temperature control. My kitchen was pretty hot on the day of making this dough, around 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm using cool water at around 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. To make the dough, grab a large bowl, pour the water into it, add the yeast, the salt, the whole wheat bread flour, the whole grain rye flour, and then give it all a good mix to dissolve the salt and yeast completely. Once you're happy with the mix, add the final ingredient, the white bread flour. Then grab your dough scraper and mix it to a dough. The hydration of this dough is 70%. If you don't want to use the rye flour, you can't get a hold of it, you can swap it for more whole wheat flour without making any other adjustments. If you want your rolls to be made up of less white flour and more whole wheat flour, I would suggest increasing the hydration to 75 or even 80% depending on how much whole wheat flour you use. The same goes for adding seeds. The more seeds you add, the higher hydration should be. Of course, you could just add a little bit of caraway for flavor, then you won't need to adjust anything. And if you want to sweeten these rolls, you can add some honey, malt syrup, even treacle. I would keep those ingredients below 10%. They would add enough sweetness and they would help with browning the crust. Okay, back to our base recipe. I usually start off the mix using my dough scraper and then finish it off by hand. The dough is slightly sticky, so once you finish mixing it, wet your hands with water before folding it up into a nice neat ball and placing it in a clean bowl. And now let's give it a quick temperature check. Between 25 to 26 degrees Celsius is perfect. If it's warmer, don't worry about it. If it's cooler, leave it at a room temperature for a little while before refrigerating it. We'll pop the dough in the fridge for 30 minutes to cool down before giving it one fold. The fold is just there for effective cooling and even temperature distribution. Once the time is up, remove the dough from the fridge, wet your hands and your dough scraper with some water, then release the dough from the bowl, lift it up and fold it in the air. Push the sides of the dough down and then back up into the middle of it. Keep repeating this whilst turning the dough until the dough ball is nice and smooth. It is similar to folding it on the table, but instead we're doing it upside down. Okay, after the fold, place the dough back into the bowl, cover it up, and leave it in the fridge to cold ferment for 18 to 24 hours. And by the next day, it should look like this. Nice and big and full of gas. It has fermented beautifully. And now we can move on to weighing the dough, dividing it and pre-shaping it. This recipe makes 8 little rolls. If you want to make fewer larger rolls, you can divide the dough into fewer pieces. Or if you want to make them even smaller, then you can divide the dough into 10 or even 12 pieces. I think I've made a good standard portion size, not too big and not too small. To each their own, of course. You could even keep the dough whole and make a large loaf out of it. When it comes to pre-shaping, we're going for nice little tight dough balls. So flatten the dough, fold the edge over the middle whilst going around in a circle until reach point where it started. Then flip the dough smooth side up again, tighten it against the table, that's your pre-shaping done. Dust dough balls with flour, cover them up, leave them to rest for around 20 minutes. The pre-shaping step will ensure that all our rolls turn out nice and uniform. And it also gives us another opportunity to build some tension in this dough. Okay, after resting, it's final shaping time. Dust the dough balls on the table lightly with some flour, pick up a dough ball and place it on the table with the smooth side down and then flatten it out. Now cross the top 2 corners over each other in the middle, creating a rough triangle shape at the top. And now, starting from the top, simply roll up the dough nice and tight. And that's pretty much it. Making a miniature loaf works exactly the same way as making a large loaf. You could also make round rolls, simply repeat the pre-shaping step. When it comes to the oblong shaped ones, there's one more thing you can do after you roll them up, and that is pinching the seam together and pinching the ends together. Alternatively, you could roll the dough against the table to create tapered ends. You know, just like with most other simple breads, there are many options. After the final shaping, place these chunky boys on a non-stick paper lined baking tray, dust them lightly with some flour and cover them up for the final proof. My kitchen was still quite hot on this day, so the final proof only took me 30 minutes. Make sure you preheat the oven to 220 degrees Celsius, 430 Fahrenheit, fan off. Now to make these bad boys easier to score, we're going to use a technique which I haven't used before. We'll remove the cling film from the tray halfway through the final proof. This will let the surface of the dough dry out just enough so that it's easy to slash. So 15 minutes with the cover, 15 minutes without. Now we can score them and bake them. Don't cut them very deep and go in at an angle. Try to cut them in one smooth move. If you're using a knife, I would suggest using one of those little tomato knives with a serrated edge. If you are using scissors, place little shallow cuts in a line. Or whatever you decide to do, after scoring, spray them down with water. Make sure the whole surface is nice and moist. Okay, these babies are ready for the oven, so let's get them in there. They'll take around 25 minutes to fully bake. If you feel that your oven is drying out the surface of the dough too much too soon, you can open the oven around 5 minutes into the bake and give the breads another spray of water. And if your oven is like mine and is baking bread on one side more than on the other, then turn the tray around halfway through the bake. And once your rolls are beautifully golden brown all over, they're ready. I think they turned out great. All we need to do now is leave them to cool down slightly and then tuck in. Ideally, a bread like this should be eaten soon after baking. Because it's so small, it has a larger crust to crumb ratio, and it will stale within just a few hours. And the crust won't stay crispy for very long. The cold fermentation method is definitely the way to go here. If you want to have these for dinner, all you need to do is mix the dough on the previous day and then finish it within an hour and a half on the next day. And convenience is only one of the benefits of cold fermentation. It also makes the dough a lot easier to handle. It makes it easier to shape and score. It improves the flavor a lot. And it makes the crust nice and crispy. And it takes no extra effort. So head over to the cold fermentation playlist. It is full of delicious and easy recipes. And if you want to watch some detailed videos about the principles of cold fermentation, head over to the Principles of Baking playlist for those. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them down in the comments and perhaps tell me about your favorite cold fermented recipes. And don't forget to click that subscribe button if you haven't already. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.